Welcome to Weekend Ag Matters from the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network. Join us for an in-depth look at Iowa agriculture. Here's your host, Mark Magnuson.
Hello and welcome into Weekend Ag Matters on the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network. I'm Mark Magnuson. In today's episode, I will speak with Tyler Steinkamp of Winfield United. Dustin Hoffmann is joined by Iowa Secretary of Agriculture Mike Naig, and Russ provides his faith-based segment. Let's turn our attention now to this week's news headlines. The weather pattern shifting to El Niño this year has been a topic of conversation in weather forecast for some time. Chad Merrill, senior meteorologist at AccuWeather, says the El Niño weather pattern arrived earlier this month.
El Niño got started at the very beginning of June, so we are already seeing the equatorial Pacific responding to El Niño conditions as we speak. And the latest sea surface temperature anomalies in the equatorial Pacific favor on the cusp of a weak to moderate El Niño right now here at the end of June.
Merrill says the forecast for July is calling for dry conditions, even in areas that have already received a lot of moisture this spring and in the early summer.
Yeah, we have drought, especially across northern Minnesota and the Dakotas. And in the short term, we have this large area of high pressure that's going to build across the east and then expand into the plains and then migrate into the Mountain West and should become anchored somewhere between the Mountain West and the Western Plains for a good chunk of July.
In addition to the dryness, many rural areas of the country will also expect to experience increased temperatures.
We're also seeing the potential for some pretty hot days. Farmers don't want to see 3 consecutive days with temperatures in the mid-90s because that can dry things out.
The long-term forecast shows a return of more precipitation in August.
I don't think the yields are going to drop off significantly, but they'll drop up a little bit in July. And then heading through August, we see near average rainfall across the Corn Belt and likely for temperatures to be near to slightly above average. So that's what we're seeing through the end of August at this point.
On Tuesday, USDA published both the planted acreage and quarterly grain stocks reports. Commodity broker Greg McBride of Allendale says there are only slight adjustments to the corn acres in the planted acreage report compared to the March planting intentions report.
Corn acres came in 5,000 acres above the March estimate, 95.343 million acres. Expectation was actually for a cut of 300 to 350,000 acres. So really no change on the corn side of things. It's not going to change anything from a production standpoint. So what we'll be watching for would be when the USDA eventually does make adjustments to yield. And last year they didn't make any adjustments to yield until we got to that August report. So nothing major to discuss on the corn side of things.
McBride says the soybean acreage number was mostly in line with pre-report estimates within the industry.
On the soybean side of things, it was pretty well as expected, 85.365 million acres now. That was just under the pre-report estimate by 4,000 acres. So they pretty well threw a dart and hit the bullseye on that.
He details the adjustments to the numbers in the quarterly grain stocks report as well.
The quarterly grain stocks was actually kind of interesting here. So no major craziness out of soybeans. They were at 1.061 billion bushels. That was 15 million bushels higher than what the average guess was. So it kind of basically again really kind of hit the nail on the head there. Corn coming in about 100 to 115 million bushels below the average guess. That is going to be friendly.
Crude oil prices are returning to levels that were familiar before the United States war with Iran, but diesel and gasoline prices are still higher. It is expected that diesel and gasoline prices will recede to normal levels, but it may take a few months, probably at least until the end of August. That's the opinion of an agricultural and energy analyst in Champaign, Illinois.
I think what we can expect here in the U.S. is that diesel fuel exports are probably going to stay pretty elevated here for a little bit of time and continue to kind of keep us in a tight inventory situation. And diesel fuel, I think, will be the last of the refined fuels to kind of get back to a comfort level, if you will.
That is Dave Chatterton with Strategic Farm Marketing. He says that farmer customers will need to be cautious when locking in purchases for fall fuel needs and harvest season.
I think you need to have some working inventory ahead of you just because of where inventories are at or fuel levels are at. And it could be a case of availability versus pricing at that point. And don't take that as a panic and you need to run out and fill everything today. But we like to run about our tanks about a third to a half full right now, or our contract levels, and be a little bit patient. I think, we've got diesel fuel futures here. if you want to mark that from a price perspective, right around that 318 to 320 mark today. I think the downside below $3 here between now and fall might be kind of tough to come by.
The risk is skewed to the upside because U.S. diesel supplies are still being exported. Chatterton says he wouldn't say no to anyone filling a tank or contracting at least partial diesel fuel needs today for the remainder of the year. That's all the time we have for headlines this week. Let's turn things over now to Russ Parker and his faith-based Food for Thought segment. That's here next on Weekend Ag Matters on the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network, where Iowa Ag matters.
Have you ever looked for something for a long time? I'm not talking about an item that's simply lost or misplaced. I'm talking about searching for something that seems to leave a void somewhere in your life. For years, I've been looking for a photograph of my father's family, a picture with his mom and dad and his brother and sister and my dad all together. I'm sure one existed at some point, but with each passing year, the chances of finding a photo are becoming less and less. I imagine you've been looking for something too. Maybe it's an old car that reminds you of your youth, or maybe it's a tractor that you learned to drive on. And I've got one of my own, a correct air cleaner for a 1958 Chevy with a 2-barrel carburetor. I actually have found a couple, but at $500 each, I've decided I'm going to keep looking. As we celebrate Independence Day this weekend, it's worth remembering that our nation's founders were searching for something too. They longed for liberty, the opportunity to govern themselves, and the freedom to worship according to their convictions. Those were all worthy pursuits, and we're blessed to enjoy the freedoms that they secured. As important as those freedoms are, they remind us that even political freedom cannot satisfy the deepest needs of the human heart. And this raises an interesting question. What price are we willing to pay for the things that we're searching for? Sometimes the cost is measured in dollars. Other times it's measured in time. A few hours, months, years, or even a lifetime. Perhaps there's another price that we don't think about nearly enough. It's possible to spend a lifetime searching for happiness, fulfillment, success, acceptance, or significance, believing that if we just find the next thing, we'll finally be satisfied. Yet the search never ends because the emptiness was never meant to be filled by possessions or accomplishments. In the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus says, "Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well." Notice he doesn't say not to search. He simply tells us where to search first. There's nothing wrong with looking for an old family photograph or a treasured tractor or even that hard-to-find car part. Those things connect us to memories and people we love. But if we're looking for lasting joy, peace, purpose, or hope, those are the treasures that won't be found in an auction or an antique store or an online marketplace. My intuition tells me that our greatest discovery and our greatest joy isn't finding the things that we can touch and see, or even the freedoms we celebrate this weekend. It's realizing we found the things that truly last and were never really hidden in the first place. God's love, his grace, his forgiveness, and the promise that in him we are never truly lost. Food for thought, I hope. This is Russ Parker. Have a blessed day.
Thank you, Russ. Up next, we will have my conversation with Tyler Steinkamp of Winfield United. That's next on Weekend Ag Matters on the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network.
Stay informed with the closing market report from the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network, your essential summary of the day's market activities and their impact on the agricultural economy. Join us for timely updates and expert commentary on commodity prices and market trends, with trusted ag market analysts from around the Midwest. Tune in every Monday through Friday on your local Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network affiliate for your daily market recap and insights to stay ahead in the ag economy.
Mark Magnuson for the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network, and I'm joined today by Tyler Steinkamp with Winfield United. Tyler, we're here at the Winfield United Field Day near Story City, learning a lot about drone technology and spraying applications. Could you tell us, please, though, first of all, your role within Winfield United?
Yeah, so I'm a technical agronomist covering the states of Iowa, Missouri, Wisconsin, and Northern Illinois.
So we're set up in stations here around the field day today, and I know you have a dedicated area that you're working on. What was your station here today that you're focusing on?
Yeah, so our station is mainly focused on making sure that the once the droplet leaves that drone, that we actually get it to the target. So looking at swath width, looking at droplet size and penetration through the canopy.
Now, does the average farmer understand, I guess, some of the benefits of a drone, maybe if they haven't messed around with a drone, about penetrating that canopy like you talked about? Because we know with that rotor wash and the movement of the air, it can do some things that some other applications don't necessarily do as good of a job at, doesn't it?
Yeah, it can. And really pinpointing that, a lot of farmers don't realize how much of an effect that prop wash can have. You know, as we start to speed up, though, that actually gets less and less, and then it's more of almost a traditional type of application.
So in the broadest of terms then, is it better to fly a little bit lower and get that benefit from the wash? Or is it more of just, I guess, for any specific setup in drone, you have to dial it into what it needs?
Every drone's just a little bit different, and so they're set up to do different things. And honestly, you can do a really good job with a drone that flies fast if you're using the right adjuvants like master lock, for example, to get better canopy deposition. You can also slow it down and get a little bit more prop wash in there and manage that swath that way as well.
And one thing I learned here this morning was just exactly what you're talking about, how important it is to dial in and calibrate your specific drone to what you're trying to do. So what are those things, those resources that Winfield United provides to help farmers out in that case?
Yeah, so Winfield United has a research facility that we call it the Innovation Center, and we look at all the different droplet sizes and spectrums coming out of these rotary atomizers, and we're able to help farmers and applicators make better decisions on what to put it in the tank to make sure we're managing that droplet size. Because here's the thing that we run into. Small droplets tend to end up directly below the drone because you do have a lot of canopy wash and those type of things. Large droplets end up on the outside. So if I could better manage with the tank mix, better manage the size of the droplet so I get more even droplet size, I get better overall coverage throughout that swath width.
Tyler, is it fun to be kind of on the leading edge of this newer technology to agriculture? Because we've had drones now for a few years, but they're continuing to improve. They're continuing to just get bigger and be able to do more things. Is that exciting for you?
It is very exciting. It makes it challenging because there's definitely a learning curve. Every year, it's a new drone and a new parameter that we're learning. And so, just getting out here, today we're running with blue dye across paper just to see what that swath width is. It's really interesting to see the difference in drones.
And do you think farmers have already gotten better at adapting this technology to their operations and being able to use it in the ways they want to?
I think they're getting better. I also think the technology is getting better and more adaptive to allow us to more pinpoint what we are actually trying to do with that drone.
What are still the biggest challenges for spraying with the drone right now? Is it just that limitation on size and capacity of the tank? Is it the cost to buy the drone and get it on your operation? What is that biggest challenge right now?
I think the biggest challenge is just the fact that early on, they just weren't practical, right? Now we're getting to the point where they're large enough that they're practical. And so now more of the challenge is just, hey, do I have the confidence that I can actually get what I want, where I want, when I want? And I think that's the hardest part.
And does Winfield United provide human resources that you're able to reach out to and help with some of these issues?
We can help out. I mean, we don't have necessarily dedicated people to it, but most of our Winfield United people have at least had some aspect of training in drones and can help at least funnel it into people that know quite a bit within the company.
So Tyler, just to wrap up here today at the field day near Story City, what is your hope for people, what they've been out here able to learn about today, their take home that they can go home with and say, hey, this is something that I really remember from that field day over by Story City?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing for people to take away is go out and actually look at the swath that you're getting with the drone. Dial it in, use the right adjuvants in the tank to get you better deposition coverage like master lock, and make sure you're testing, make sure you're getting a good pattern out of the drone.
What's the best way our viewers, our listeners can learn more if they want to find out about any of the things we talked about here today?
Yeah, so you can check out winfieldunited.com, or you can talk to any of our local Winfield United representatives or our retailers.
He is Tyler Steinkamp with Winfield United. Tyler, thanks so much for the time. Appreciate it, and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you to Tyler Steinkamp of Winfield United for joining today's episode of Weekend Ag Matters.
Looks like another perfect day to get out there and enjoy the summer.
You hear that? Live music, laughing kids, the roar of the rides, and someone yelling, "Corn dogs!" That's Fair Spirit at the Iowa State Fair, August 13th through 23rd in Des Moines. 11 days of blue ribbon traditions, big summer nights, incredible food, and the kind of memories you talk about all year long. This is your Iowa State Fair. Plan your visit now at iowastatefair.org.
August 13th through the 23rd.
Welcome back to Weekend Ag Matters. Here's your host, Dustin Hoffmann.
Welcome back to Weekend Ag Matters. I'm Dustin Hoffmann, and it's time for our monthly sit-down with Iowa Ag Secretary Mike Naig. And in this section, we're going to talk about some of the issues with both animal health and some water quality. So here's what the Secretary had to say. First, let's talk about some water quality announcements and some soil conservation announcements that you guys made only yesterday.
Yeah, this is part of that effort that you and I talked about coming out of the legislative session this year. We had a really comprehensive water quality package that was passed bipartisan basis, overwhelming support, House and Senate, signed by the governor. And we call it the Farm to Faucet plan. And that is that it makes investments, strategic investments in water treatment in central Iowa. It makes investments in stormwater, wastewater, drinking water, grants, and low interest loans for small communities. It invests in additional water monitoring information. And it also invests, we were able to put another $50 million over the next 12 years into specifically working in the watershed above the Des Moines metropolitan area. So we call it the Greater Des Moines Watershed, 22 counties. It touches 22 counties or parts of 22 counties. And what we're going to do is you're going to see a series of announcements made rolling out some specific projects. Just this week, we announced this enhanced cover crop cost share, and that is to increase the rate for a repeat user to $25. And it also raises the cap. We usually are trying to spread some dollars around the state, and we put a cap of 160 acres on our normal traditional cost share, cover crop cost share program. This is going to increase that to 500 because we're hearing that there's farms that want to go beyond. And so we're going to lift that cap. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to double the cover crop acres in those 22 counties because I just candid, few of those counties are areas where we've got lower cover crop adoption. And so we're really trying to push on that and bring this additional incentive. So that's just one example, but there'll be a couple of others that we roll out here as we get through the summer and into the fall.
Well, of course, it's great to have that announcement already because in the fall, when we start thinking about those cover crops and starting to implement some of those plans for maybe even in the next spring before the planting goes, it's definitely good to have some of these ideas available, or I should say these resources available for these farmers to look into what their options are.
100%. Actually, I've had a couple of visits. One, I was in Pocahontas County yesterday, did a roundtable with farmers on conservation, stood in a field in Humboldt County with a gentleman who has been he's an incredible adopter of cover crops, strip till, no-till, and he's really working to help others understand what's going on as well. And then I was with a group up in Howard County, Cresco, which is an area where we've seen significant cover crop usage up in a very northern county in Iowa. Major lesson coming out of all those visits was need to streamline how this process works in terms of applying for cover crop cost share, but also really important to have a plan. You decide to do it, but you need to, before that seed goes in the ground, these gentlemen are telling me, you better understand how it's going to come out or how you're going to terminate that in the spring. And really that planning is so important. So start now, go to cleanwateriowa.org. There's more information there, but cost share is available and also information about how to really be successful.
And Secretary, not to put you on the spot, but I have been noticing we've been talking about the different water quality projects that the state has had. We obviously have talked about the programs that have been put in place even back when Bill Northey was secretary. But, we talk about some of these things, but there are people who are still concerned about the water quality, and there are some issues that still need to be worked out. Now, I know that obviously these problems didn't develop overnight, and so they can't be fixed overnight. But, where are we at overall compared to where things started all those years ago?
Well, first of all, clean water is not negotiable. Every single Iowan deserves and needs to have access to clean water. And that's really what we're trying to focus on here. So we've got a long history of doing soil conservation work in this state. In fact, we've seen significant phosphorus loss reductions because of that work around keeping soil in place, improving soil health. Now we need to apply that same logic to water quality, which is really specific to nitrate. And so that's critically important. Nutrient reduction strategy is really our effort to do that work around water quality and nitrates in particular. And we've seen a dramatic increase in the types of practices that we need to see: nitrate reducing wetlands, bioreactors, saturated buffers, and cover crops. Cover crops are key. We've gone from a few thousand acres of cover crops before the strategy to 4 million acres today, and we need to double that. We need to go beyond and really push, and that's what these efforts are all about. The other piece is, and we just need to be honest about this, which is, let's not play the blame game in the state of Iowa. Let's not say if you're in the Des Moines area, you can blame everybody upstream, or if you're upstream, you can blame everybody in the Des Moines area for using water or too much water or irrigating, those types of things. Quit it. Let's move beyond that. And that's what this farm to faucet approach is all about, and bringing resources to do just that. Let's invest in water treatment infrastructure in Des Moines, because we need that to ensure that people can have safe drinking water. But let's also pair that with a response upstream, up in the watershed, to reduce the loss to begin with. It's only by working together on both ends of that equation that we'll actually be able to achieve these goals long term. So that's where we are. I always encourage folks, Iowa State University hosts a series of dashboards that really show progress or where we are in terms of implementing the strategy. That's practice adoption, water quality monitoring, attitudes, the investment. Folks can really go there. It's the Nutrient Reduction Strategy website, Iowa State University. And I would really encourage folks, if you're interested in knowing more about some of the details, the measuring, go there. There's a ton of information.
All right, moving on to the animal health spectrum now. We had that pseudorabies scare last month that we were talking about, and obviously we all know now that New World screwworm has made its way across the border. Let's start with the pseudorabies aspect of it first. Not only has that been dealt with, it's been eradicated once again here in the state, correct?
Absolutely. And so that's a situation, we very unexpected and unwelcomed, and yet something that we knew what to do. There's well-established protocols in place, frankly, from the last time that pseudorabies was eradicated from the commercial herd. We had a situation here where pigs that were in Texas in a transitional herd, meaning they were exposed to outdoor or wild swine, and those swine are known to have pseudorabies infections down there. And so those pigs made it up here into a small commercial herd, and that was detected through testing. And so what we were able to do is quarantine that site. Unfortunately, those animals did have to be depopulated. There was no spread between those animals and the other animals at that site, and there was no spread beyond that site. And we know that because we did testing. Just last week, we were able to announce that the second round of testing of those surrounding farms came back all negative, which means that we were able to maintain our disease-free status, which does have trade implications for pork in particular, but really it can be across the whole protein spectrum. So it was important to act swiftly, do exactly what we were supposed to do, prove that we were free, and be able to share that with our trading partners. And that has now been accomplished.
So was there any major real hit to our trade capability with that announcement last month?
There have been disruptions, and I would call them relatively minor, in that there was no country that shut down everything, but there are some restrictions in place, and that's exactly what USDA is now working through, the Meat Export Federation, all those folks that really work in this trade space. Now that we've declared freedom, we've checked all the boxes in terms of the protocol. That's the work that's now underway to work with those trading partners to lift any restrictions. We are aware of some restricted movements to Mexico for a few products, not all, and South Korea has been another area.
And then moving on to the New World screwworm. Now, obviously, that's not something that impacts us directly right now. It's a southern United States, Texas, and New Mexico problem right now. But obviously, there are things we need to watch for and things we need to be prepared for. And also, we've got a consumer public that is probably wondering about the quality of their food that they're getting at the grocery store. So can we talk about, from our vantage point, what we're looking at?
A couple things to think about. One is, this is not, we had screwworm in the United States back mid last century. It was eradicated the last time in the 1960s. So this is something that it's not completely new. Now, from a food safety and a consumer standpoint, I would say that there is no food safety issue here. It's not like a foreign animal disease maybe that you and I have talked about in the past, like high-path avian influenza, African swine fever. This is something, it's a parasite. This is delivered by flies into wounds. And if those larvae start feeding on that live flesh, that's problematic, obviously, but that can be treated and that animal can recover. So there's no depopulation that's needed here, like maybe a traditional approach to foreign animal disease. So that's good news because it also says there's no food safety issue here and low human health risk as well. Not that humans can't, because really it's all warm-blooded mammals can be susceptible. But think of it, you've got to have something, a wound that gets eggs laid in it and you don't watch it. That's how these things develop. So for humans to have that issue, not going to be the case. Livestock and pets are really at risk. So from a food safety standpoint, there is no food safety challenge here. Food security, however, may be, because it depends on how big, how widespread this gets. So then from the production side, yes, it's a Texas phenomenon and a Mexico phenomenon today. And there's really two ways that it can move. One is that fly population, again, that these flies that lay the eggs that create the larvae, if that moves north, they can bring this with them, obviously, and infest additional areas. The other way is for animals to move that are infested, and then that creates a population.
More with Iowa Ag Secretary Mike Naig next week on Weekend Ag Matters, but that's going to do it for today's show. Thanks to Riley, thanks to Russ, thanks to Mark, and of course, thanks to you for listening. We'll see you back here again next weekend on the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network.